walking virtually along the world's most revered footpaths and connecting the global community of pilgrims. It's the Sacred Steps Podcast. Available on YouTube and your favorite podcast app. Broadcasting from the Shea Mare Studios in Florida. Here's your host, pilgrim backpacker and author, Kevin Donahue.
Buen Camino, pilgrims, and welcome back to the Sacred Steps Podcast. I'm Kevin Donahue. If you're joining us for the first time, Buen Camino, welcome. On this show, we're walking virtually alongside pilgrims and authors, hearing their stories and connecting a community of pilgrims from across the globe. You can find all of our show notes and links from all of our episodes, Season 1 and Season 2, on our website, sacredstepspodcast.com. On today's episode, we're walking virtually alongside pilgrim and noted Camino blogger Maria Seco. Maria lives along the Camino and writes over at Spanish for Camino. She's not only a pilgrim, but she also helps those pilgrims who are making their way to Santiago de Compostela understand the culture, traditions, and language of the Camino. She has a number of resources on her blog, including some great videos, but what I really appreciate is the way she helps non-Spanish speakers learn the meanings and pronunciation for everyday terms and phrases. Before we begin, many of you know noted filmmaker and author Brian Skillen from his series of Camino books, including The Way Through a Field of Stars and his second book, Back Through a Field of Stars. Brian actually has a third book in the series coming out very soon called Home Through a Field of Stars. He and Chelsea are currently walking the caminofrances, and he's going to be checking in with us live from the Camino every few episodes. So, Brian Skillen, welcome to the Sacred Steps Podcast.
Buen Camino, Kevin.
Buen Camino.
Brian, as we discussed, you're walking the caminofrances as your new book is getting ready to launch. Where are you now?
Today, my wife Chelsea and I arrived in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port after an early morning flight out of London. We arrived in Biarritz and then took the train up here. And when we arrived, it was worth the lack of sleep because it is absolutely beautiful.
Chelsea and Brian, you've done the Camino several times, but preparing for the Camino is always new and exciting. What have you been doing to prepare for your route to Santiago de Compostela?
This week we've been packing and planning for the Camino, as well as doing a lot of work actually, because we just launched a Kickstarter for our trilogy called Through a Field of Stars. We're launching the third and final book in it actually called Home Through a Field of Stars. And so we thought it would be so cool to be on the Camino while we're running the Kickstarter so that our fans could see all the places that they love from the novel while we are hiking.
Every Camino is different, and it might be a little too soon to draw any conclusions, Brian and Chelsea, but how has this Camino been different from your past journeys?
One of the things I've noticed about the Camino this year is that there are a lot of pilgrims walking. I mean, the municipal albergue filled up in just a few minutes. So if you're coming here, arrive early.
Yeah.
Great advice. You two have quite the journey ahead.
Up ahead, we'll be waking up really early tomorrow morning to hike over the Pyrenees. We like waking up early just so that we can see all the beautiful sunrises that happen along the way, and to just soak in all the nature and take our time on our way to Roncesvalles.
Thank you. Thank you both for spending time with us, Brian and Chelsea. We'll look forward to hearing more live on the Camino in our upcoming episodes. Until then, be well, stay safe, and buen camino.
Buen Camino, Kevin and everyone on the podcast.
Yeah, buen camino.
We're so excited to take you guys on this adventure with us.
If you enjoy hearing stories of pilgrimage, tap subscribe on your podcast app so that our future episodes are available to you automatically. Leave us a comment on your streaming app and rate us, as that helps tell Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and all the others to share our show with those who may be interested in the Camino de Santiago or any of the pilgrimage routes we've been discussing on this program. Maria Seco has made Spain and the Camino more accessible to thousands of pilgrims by sharing the language of the Camino on her blog, her Facebook group, and her pages, Spanish for Camino. Maria Seco, welcome to the Sacred Steps Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I was so excited to get you on the show because I've actually been following your blog, Spanish for Camino, for a while, and it saved me when I was planning my first Camino Portuguese. You're living on the Camino Portuguese.
Yes, I am. Yes, on the Portuguese specifically, yes.
So, for those who don't know you, you run a very popular blog for Camino enthusiasts, those thinking about their first Camino, called Spanish for Camino. Where did this idea come from?
Well, it was a combination of things. As you may already know, if you've been following me for a while, I used to live in Ireland. I lived in Ireland for 15 years. And well, I was teaching Spanish there already. So, especially in the last couple of years, I started getting a lot of people that were coming to the classes, to the courses. Their motivation was the Camino. Either they had already walked the Camino and felt frustrated because they didn't have any Spanish, and at some point during their trip they needed to communicate and they had difficulties with that, so they wanted to go back for another Camino and they wanted to learn a little bit before they went back, or people who were preparing for their first Camino. So that was one thing, and I was like, oh wow, I didn't know the Camino was so popular. Of course, I knew about the Camino. I mean, I've known always. I can remember a time when I didn't know about the Camino. But growing up, it wasn't so popular. Not so many people walked it. So at first, I was surprised that so many people abroad, outside of Spain, were walking and were interested in it. And then I moved back to Spain, moved back to my hometown, which is Pontevedra. So as you mentioned, it's right on the Camino. And so I started actually seeing pilgrims every morning. When I left my house in the morning, I had to pass, kind of cross the Camino, and every morning I would see at least a pilgrim or two, sometimes more. And I was like, oh, wow, I never saw this before. Before I moved to Ireland, I don't remember ever seeing pilgrims, crossing town. And some of them, obviously, the ones who were not Spanish, some of them, sometimes they were quite lost and they wanted to ask, but they didn't have the Spanish to do it. So, all of these things combined, I started thinking, okay, maybe I should do something, and yeah, that's how the idea started. So yeah, I started with the blog, and the idea is to combine kind of maybe information about the Camino, tips or cultural things too, but always include some Spanish words in every post.
Maria, so the pilgrims are walking through and they don't always know which words to use. How do you know where to start teaching Spanish for Camino?
Well, I guess the best way is to experience the Camino myself firsthand, have firsthand experience. So, then what kind of your routine is every day, the kind of things you need, and all that. So yeah. So of course, I had to walk the Camino, although I never had any interest in it before in my life.
Very interesting.
But then all of a sudden, it's like, okay, now I have to do this.
Well, the Camino definitely has become more of a cultural phenomenon with more and more pilgrims joining every single year, it seems, especially these last 2 years with the Holy Year. Let's come back to your motivation for walking the Camino, but I wonder if you'd play a little Camino 101 with me. What are those words that pilgrims need to learn as the very first Spanish words or phrases they might need on the Camino de Santiago?
Well, I suppose everybody would tell you please and thank you.
Okay.
Por favor and gracias. Now, a word of caution here. for English speakers. You use please and thank you way more than we do in Spain. So it's okay. It's actually, you should reduce the number of times you say please and thank you, because you can actually overdo it.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's something I always tell my students, like, okay, cut down the number of times you say please and thank you, because if you do the same, number of times you would in English, you'll probably be overdoing it. And it kind of have the opposite effect. You're trying to sound nice, be polite, respectful, but when you say it too much, it makes you look almost like suspicious, like
I don't want to
a
look
bit
suspicious,
dodgy.
so I got to cut that down. Okay.
What's wrong with this person? Why are they being so, overly nice, extra, it can be too much. So yeah, please and thank you is okay, but don't overdo them.
Perfect. So I'm not going to overdo please and thank you. One of the things that I love on the Camino, and people who follow the podcast know this, I love to get a bacon bocadilla. So if I were going into a cafe, how would I go about asking for a bacon bocadilla or something, maybe for breakfast?
Yeah, when you're asking for something, whether it's in a cafe or in a shop, pharmacy, a very handy word to have is quería, which would be the equivalent of the English I'd like. So it's a polite form already. So you can even forget about the please at the end if you want. You're being polite already. So quería, and then you just add what you want. In this case, quería un bocadillo de bacon.
All right. Now I know exactly the way to say it the next time I'm going through Spain. Our pilgrims find themselves sort of looking for destinations in towns. They're looking for the albergue. They're looking for the cathedral. They're looking for an ATM. How would somebody go about asking where something is located?
Yeah, that's very easy too. You need two words. Donde, which means where, and está, which is, and then the place that you're looking for. So, ¿dónde está el albergue? Or ¿dónde está la catedral? Or I don't know, depending on what you're looking for, you just add the word for it at the end. But ¿dónde está is what you need.
In elementary Spanish here in the States, they always teach us the next word that always goes with that for school children is biblioteca. Everybody seems to be looking for the library in the United States. That's how we learn Spanish, I guess. There are some few words that are specific to somebody who's a walker and carrying a backpack. What are some of those things that we carry with us that we may need to have to explain as we're walking? Like how do I say blister? How do I say backpack? Some of those things in Spanish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, backpack, the word for backpack is mochila. Mochila.
Mochila, okay.
Yeah, and blister is ampolla. Ampolla. So if you want to say that you have blisters, you can say tengo ampollas. Tengo mean I have. Tengo ampollas.
I need to make sure I add no in the front of that because I do not want to have blisters.
Well, nobody wants them, right?
That's great. Thanks for playing a little Camino 101 with us. But you mentioned that when you were first living in Spain, growing up in Spain, you didn't see as many pilgrims as you did when you returned from Ireland. So when did you walk your first Camino?
I walked in 2019.
Okay.
And I actually I didn't walk the Portuguese, as you might think. It was the most obvious choice since, I live on it. But for some reason, I don't know, the English one was kind of calling me, let's say. So that was my first in 2019.
Oh, so we didn't cross one another in 2019. My first Camino was the Camino Portuguese in 2019. I was thinking maybe I walked through your hometown and we crossed along the way, but I did walk through your hometown. You were off on another Camino. So next
Well,
time,
maybe I was in town when you walked, but we just didn't meet back then. But maybe in the next one, I hear you're walking it again.
yeah, I'm going to do the Camino Portuguese again in 2023 from Porto with my son, Jack, who's going to be 14. I'll be 50. That's where all the gray comes from, Maria. So I get the opportunity to see the Camino through his eyes and really enjoy his first experiences walking the Portuguese, which is such a great Camino route. You said as you're in Pontevedra and you walk up from Tui, Porino, you make your way all the way up. It's one of my favorite Caminos, and we get to be back in Padrón and all the cities along the Spanish section of the Camino Portuguese. So looking forward to that. I'm going to have to bring you with me so I can get my bacon bocadilla from the cafe.
Yes, no, we definitely have to meet when you're in town. Yes.
We'll do it. Now, you've been busy. You work on your blog, Spanish for Camino, which we'll link down in the show notes. One of the things I love about the blog, just as an aside to all of our audience, Maria takes time to really dig into the culture of the Camino as well and give pronunciation. So there's actually a recording of her voice explaining all the different words that she's discussing and all the different elements of Camino culture. So in every blog post, there's 3 or 4 pronunciations to help you prepare for your Camino. We'll link it in the show notes below. But I know you've also been busy with some ebooks that you're publishing, because I saw those on the website now too. So what's going on with the ebooks?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. I had some which I'm now redoing. Those were more like to learn Spanish, covering all the main topics that you may need as a pilgrim, like you mentioned before, accommodation or the food, asking for your bocadillo, or explaining that you have blisters or some other health issue, all of those things. I'm kind of, I want to improve them a bit. So I'm working on those at the moment. So those are not available. But apart from that, I wrote short novel in easy Spanish for anyone who's learning Spanish, obviously, but particularly for those with an interest on the Camino, because it's a story of a woman who walks the Camino, her first Camino. So it goes from, when she finds out about the Camino and decides to walk, and all the planning process, and it gets into Spain and walking, the stages, things that happen to her, the people she meets, all of that. So it covers, again, all the vocabulary that a pilgrim would need. Like, okay, so this woman has to go and find a place to sleep. So she needs to go and ask, okay, do you have a free bed or room? She needs to go and order food. All of those things are in there.
What a great way to learn, have a greater understanding of Spanish for the Camino than reading a book about the Camino in elementary Spanish. So that's a great resource. Where can everyone find your new book?
Well, it's available, the ebook, it's available on my website, and it's also on Amazon. So on Amazon, apart from the ebook, there's also the paperback version available.
So we'll link that down below in the show notes for those of you who are interested in picking up Maria's novel from Amazon or from her website. You can get the paperback or the ebook.
The conversation continues momentarily. For information and links from the show, visit sacredstepspodcast.com. Know someone considering pilgrimage? Share this episode as a text from your device. To support the show, please leave a star rating in your podcast app. And now, the Sacred Steps Podcast continues.
I also understand, Maria, you've got a walk and talk coming up maybe later this month, you're taking people on the Camino?
Yes. Yes, I actually did this for the first time in 2019. But I did it with another teacher. So we kind of got together and said, okay, what could we do? We came up with this idea of bringing a group of people who are learning Spanish and have a week of Spanish immersion, but on the Camino, walking the Camino. So we walked the English back then. It was a fantastic experience. I mean, we really had the best time. It was a really nice group and it was fantastic. So we were going to do it again in 2020, but we know how 2020
We know how that
went.
worked out. Yeah.
Yeah, so we had to cancel. So this year, finally, I'm doing it again. The other teacher, she couldn't join me, so I'll be on my own. So it will be a smaller group.
As someone who's grown up with the Camino literally in their backyard, and you've seen the influx of pilgrims, there's probably some elements of Camino culture that could be better appreciated by American pilgrims, European pilgrims, UK pilgrims who are coming to the Camino Portuguese. What are some of those elements that we don't know as visitors, either cultural norms or practices that we should maybe take more consideration of when we're guests in Spain?
Well, there are several things. There is, on the one hand, I think not everybody, obviously, but certain people seem to have this idea of Spain that sometimes I think they got stuck in the 50s and they think Spain's still in the 50s. So the idea they have of Spain, I don't think it really matches what Spain is like today. So, for instance, they see Spain as a very religious, very Catholic place, when the reality is that, not so many people, for instance, go to Mass every week or things generally, people are not so conservative as people think, as all these people coming from the US, especially from the US, maybe the UK might be a bit closer, might have a more updated vision of Spain.
Yeah.
So that would be one thing. And the thing is that because some of these people, they don't speak a word of Spanish, so they walk through Spain, but everything they see, they interpret through that wrong perception they have of Spain.
Great point.
Because they don't speak Spanish, they don't talk to anybody local or anything. They go back with the same ideas still in their heads. They actually reinforce the ideas because they say, oh yeah, everything they see, they interpret through that. And I've seen, I see examples of these, for instance, on Facebook groups, comments that people write, and I'm reading them and like, what are they talking about? I mean, this is so wrong. But, in their mind, yeah, that's what it is. And that's the way things are. And that's the idea they have. So what they see, they interpret it through that. So that would be one thing. I mean, I think some people need to update their vision of Spain. I mean, we're not in the 50s anymore.
Well, you make a great point, Maria, because, and I apologize for interrupting you. You make a great point because if you're perceiving Spain from a few decades ago, where a higher percentage of the population were daily or weekly practicing Catholics, that's changed generationally with the Spanish people and some of the customs. But that also makes the Camino more accessible and more welcoming because the Spanish people are not as you say, um, you know, I I don't want to say the wrong phrase here, but it's a little less Catholic than it has been in past decades, making it
Oh
more
yeah,
accessible for
absolutely.
everyone. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And all these, I've seen comments, especially about people maybe saying, okay, they've been refused service at a cafe or something, which of course I don't know why that happened, because we only have this person's version of the story and they didn't know any Spanish and they don't know why. But you have people commenting, and a lot of people, for instance, I've seen this commenting on, maybe it's because you were wearing shorts or a sleeveless t-shirt, or you have tattoos. And like, for goodness sake, I mean, people in Spain wear shorts all the time and sleeveless t-shirts, and
Yeah.
people have tattoos, and it's not a big deal. And I haven't heard of anyone being refused service at a cafe because they were wearing shorts or were covered in tattoos. So obviously there was something else. But people, because they have this idea that, okay, Spain is such a conservative place, so people dress very conservatively and blah blah blah, all these things. That's how they explain things that they don't know why, because they don't speak the language. So whatever they were told, they didn't understand. So the explanation is, yeah, okay, it's the clothes I was wearing or something like that. I'm sure it was something else, but
That's really interesting, Maria. Let's help people learn a little bit more about Spain before their first Camino or next Camino. One of the things I see on Facebook groups, since we're talking about Facebook groups, people often say, "Is it safe to drink the water in Spain?" I understand Spain is a first world country. Maria, one of the greatest economies in the world. Is it okay to drink the water in Spain?
well, I drink it all the time.
It always floors me that question comes up, and people, it's a fair question, I guess. If you've never been somewhere, you don't
Yeah, I
want to
mean, I
drink bad water,
suppose, yeah,
but
it is. It is. And normally, if it's not, there would be a sign, if there's a fountain,
non-potable.
something. If it's not, there would be a sign saying no potable. So if you see it, and with a big red cross there, so even if you can't read, okay, I shouldn't drink water from here. But otherwise, yeah, it's. There might be a specific problem in one place.
Sure.
For some reason, but in general, yes, it is perfectly safe. You don't need any special vaccines to come into Spain either. That's another question I've seen, maybe not so much recently, but yeah, I've seen a few times too. So yes.
And let's help people enjoy Spain a little more. I think once they get into Galicia, they see the menu starts to change a little bit from other parts of Spain. You've grown up in this region. What are some popular menu items that you would recommend visitors try?
Well, there's one that I'm sure most people try when they get to Galicia, which is the octopus. I understand it's not for everybody. Maybe the idea of eating octopus, if it's not something you're used to, might not be to everybody's taste. But, well, I mean, at least give it a try. I mean, that's one of our kind of most typical dishes. I mean, seafood in general. You won't find the seafood in the pilgrims menu, but if one day you can splurge a bit and go somewhere else, definitely you should try some seafood. It's really good. I mean, I'd say, what can I say? Everything is good. I mean, the food in general is quite good. Another typical item would be empanada, which is like a pie. So you can have many different fillings. I mean, tuna is a very popular one, but they make empanadas with all sorts of things inside. What else? I don't know. I mean, the meat is generally quite good too.
Yeah.
I mean,
So you mentioned the octopus, which is pulpo, right?
Pulpo, yes.
Pulpo. That's something that is very well known throughout the Galicia region in Spain. We also hear a lot about these peppers from Padron area, which is very near
Padron,
you.
yes.
So the Padron peppers are something that seems to be served quite a bit, that are just either steamed or quickly prepared. What's going on with these
Usually
peppers?
fried, yeah.
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 So I've got
Usually
to try
fried.
those. Absolutely. And then,
Oh, definitely, yes.
the thing that people also ask me about time to time is, do they have wine in Spain? Imagine that.
Is there any region that doesn't have its own specific wine? That would be the question, because I think there's the different. I mean, I know the Rioja one is probably the best known internationally, and the caminofrances goes through the Rioja region. But I mean, there are wines in probably almost every region of Spain. In fact, we have a few in Galicia too. The best known is called Alvarinho, which is a white wine. But I mean, every region has different wines. So yes, plenty of wine.
And making it simple for our English friends, it's vino tinto. For
Vino, yeah. The V in Spanish is pronounced as a B. Mm-hmm. So vino tinto would be the red wine. And vino blanco, the white wine.
Good. And pilgrims, if you're making your first trip to Spain, please know that if you make an effort, the Spanish people will pour their hearts out to you. If you forget the word for something, most people along the Camino will understand your broken Spanish or broken English explanations. But learning some of these simple phrases will make your stay more enjoyable and also help you to learn more about the places that you're seeing and visiting, as Maria said. Now, for me, it's cerveza, which pretty sure they keep bringing me beer every time I ask for it. But I don't know. I thought I was ordering water, so I just keep drinking the beer, Maria.
Very good. Make sure you drink Estrella Galicia. So.
Exactly.
Not just any cerveza.
Feels like home. So in the brief time we have left, you have your upcoming Camino Portuguese walk. You've got the book out now. Will you continue to be updating your Facebook page at Spanish for Camino and the blog as well?
Oh, yes. I mean, the page, I tend to keep it active all the time. And the blog, I mean, I used to post initially more frequently. Now, not so much, but still maybe at least once a month, I would post a new article with new words. And yeah, as you said, all the Spanish words with the pronunciation. So that was something that was quite important to me. Because I hate those, when you get a travel guide and it has a list of useful phrases, and I always found them very useless because I look at them and I don't know how to pronounce them. So I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to do with this list? I can't say these phrases. If I try to say them, I'm sure nobody will understand me because, I have no idea how this language is pronounced. And even if they say something from the list back to me, I'm not going to recognize it either because in my head, it's probably sounding in a very different way. So that's why, the adding the audios was a very important part of the blog for me. I didn't want to make another useless list of phrases and words.
And Spanish for Camino is such a great resource for pilgrims with the pronunciations, and it's also a great representation of you as an ambassador for Spain, reaching out and welcoming those pilgrims who are coming from all over the world. So thank you so much for being on the podcast today, Maria. I really appreciate it. It's been great to meet you and great to spend a little time with you.
No, thank you for having me.
Until you and I are together in Spain next year, buen camino, Maria.
Pontevedra next year.
This has been the Sacred Steps Podcast. To help other pilgrims find the show, please leave a star rating on your podcast app. For episode notes, links from the show, or to contact Kevin, visit our website at sacredstepspodcast.com. You can also join our Behind the Mic email list on the website. Before you go, tap subscribe so our future episodes are available to you automatically.